For me, this was one of the strangest moments, not just in recent cable TV, but in American politics.
Aloha, good evening, and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. I'm Tulsi Gabbard, and I'm here in for Tucker.
That's Tulsi Gabbard, the former Democratic Congresswoman from Hawaii. And an important reminder here. Back in 2019, there was a moment in the Democratic presidential primary debates where she seemed to grab the spotlight.
Our Democratic Party, unfortunately, is not the party that is of, by, and for the people. It is a party that has been and continues to be influenced by the foreign policy establishment in Washington, represented by Hillary Clinton and others' foreign policy, by the military-industrial complex and other greedy corporate interests. I'm running for president to be the Democratic nominee that rebuilds our Democratic Party, takes it out of their hands, and truly puts it in the hands of the people of this country.
Her message got the attention of a lot of Democratic voters, particularly Democrats on the left. After her first two debate appearances, Gabbard became the most Googled Democratic presidential candidate, the woman of the moment. The only problem with being the most Googled candidate was that it gave a lot of Democratic voters a chance to learn more about Tulsi Gabbard. And perhaps unsurprisingly, a lot of them didn't really like what they found. Despite being a self-styled progressive, she's given a pass to authoritarians who violate human rights. She's been a backer, for example, of far-right Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his anti-Muslim brand of virulent Hindu nationalism. A fixation on quote-unquote Islamic terror may also help explain Gabbard's occasional indulgence of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad and her seemingly willful ignorance of Assad's use of chemical weapons against civilians. That culminated in a 2017 trip to Syria in which she met with Assad twice. Look, there's nothing wrong with meeting foreign dictators in the interests of peace and diplomacy. But the thing is, Tulsi Gabbard wasn't anti-war on Syria, as some of her defenders claimed. She was totally pro the Russians bombing Syrian rebel groups, including civilians, many of whom she smeared as Islamic extremists. So she's anti-war the way Donald Trump is anti-war. Of course, that's not all they have in common. They both called the 2020 election rigged. Though Gabbard was talking about the Democratic primaries. She complained the media and the DNC were conspiring against her. And she even did it as a guest on Tucker Carlson's Fox show. That's a novel way of reaching out to Democratic primary voters. Tulsi Gabbard never hit double digits in the polls, and in March 2020, she followed the rest of the field, dropping out of the race and endorsing Joe Biden for president. 2.5 years later, Biden is president, the country is on fire, and democracy itself is under threat from the right. After COVID, after Trump's big lie and the big insurrection, and now the big multiple criminal and civil investigations of Donald Trump, the right is in fact at its most fascistic, pushing wars on gender, on race, and on democracy itself. Nowhere is this trend more brazen and more successful than on Tucker Carlson's Fox show. It's the most watched primetime show on conservative TV. As we regularly point out here, it's hugely influential as a propaganda arm of the Republican Party and as a purveyor of hateful conspiracy theories like the racist Great Replacement, a notion also cited by multiple racist mass shooters in recent years. So, what is a woman who was holding forth on the Democratic presidential debate stage 2 years ago doing anchoring Fox's Hour of Hate? Maybe she was using the incredible platform given to her by Fox to reach right-wing viewers with progressive messaging about Medicare for all, about a Green New Deal, or making corporations pay their fair share of taxes. Sadly not. Gabbard, the former Democratic Congresswoman, spent much of her hour lamenting the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago, trashing Hunter Biden, ranting against trans women in mixed martial arts, and blaming Biden and his Russia sanctions for high gas prices, which are falling, by the way, and which Democrat Gabbard didn't seem to want to celebrate on Fox for some reason. Again, what do Gabbard and Carlson get out of this? The answer to that question helps illuminate the dismal state of our politics right now, and how successful the far right has been in co-opting some on the far left. Remember, in 2016, there was a lot of distaste for Hillary Clinton on the left and on the right as a symbol of elitism run amok in politics. That was Donald Trump's trick, of course. A right-wing billionaire courting the everyman, making left-wing noises about ending foreign wars and standing up for American workers, about draining the swamp. The thing is that Trumpy Republicans aren't interested in economic equality or representing the little guy. The GOP's interest is in undermining American institutions as long as Democrats hold power in those institutions. Which brings us back to Tulsi Gabbard, whom conservatives have embraced because she is telling them what they want to hear. For example, Gabbard has apologized repeatedly for being anti-LGBTQ in her early career and promised to do better. But then in 2020, she jumped on the right-wing culture wars wagon, co-authoring a bill to deprive colleges of federal funds if they let transgender women participate in women's sports. And this year, she not only backed Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis' Don't Say Gay gag law on elementary teachers, which was accompanied by an anti-gay demonization campaign, she said it needed to apply to all schools. Look, there are plenty of leftists standing up to the establishment, fighting for workers, opposing foreign wars. They're called Bernie Sanders and the Squad. But Tulsi Gabbard, she's busy standing for the far right, not the far left, both on Fox and on social media.
Parental rights are under attack all across the country as the government tries to usurp parents' rights and responsibility to raise their own children.
These biolabs in Ukraine have dangerous pathogens, and we're very concerned that they may be breached.
In this 2020 election, the DNC and the corporate media are rigging the election again.
What's happening here is not so different from what we're seeing happening in Russia, where you've got state TV and controlled messaging across the board. Law enforcement at the highest levels of government, whether it's the DOJ, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and now even the IRS, have been weaponized to target the political opponents of the Uniparty, the permanent Washington, and the Biden regime.
The far right would have you believe that these are not conspiracy theories and reactionary dogmas, but the opinions of an honest left populist challenging the establishment, and that Tulsi Gabbard is the vanguard for a new kind of far left, far right alliance against the evil establishment, against Washington, D.C. and their deep state. That is total nonsense, and it's also dangerous. Look, democracy's on fire. And one of the ways that the right has thrown fuel on that garbage fire is by trying to control the discourse, by defining its terms. You hear conservative pundits and politicians do this all the time. January the 6th, that's not an insurrection. What Donald Trump's doing, that's not criminal. What's a leftist look like? Well, either those nasty Antifa super soldiers or the good kind, like Tulsi Gabbard, a person who still identifies as a leftist, but actually says and does all the right-wing things.